من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ذلك بأنهم قالوا لن تمسنا النار إلا أياما معدودات وغرهم في دينهم ما كانوا يفترون فكيف إذا جمعناهم ليوم لا ريب فيه ووفيت كل نفس ما كسبت وهم لا يظلمون قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقات يحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير ويحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير. What is the cause to say the fire shall not touch us except for a limited number of days, and what they used to forge has deceived them regarding their religion? How will it be with them when we will gather them together on the day about which there is no doubt, and when every soul shall be paid in full what it has earned, and they shall not be wronged? Say, O Allah, Lord of sovereignty, thou givest sovereignty to whomsoever thou pleasest, and thou takest away sovereignty from whomsoever thou pleasest. Thou exaltest whomsoever thou pleasest, and thou abasest whomsoever thou pleasest. In thy hand is all good, thou surely hast power to do all things. Thou makest the night pass into the day, and makest the day pass into the night, and thou bringest forth the living from the dead, and bringest forth the dead from the living, and thou givest to whomsoever thou pleasest without measure. Let not the believers take disbelievers' offense in preference to believers, and whoever does that has no connection with Allah, except that you guard yourselves fully against Him. And Allah cautions you against His punishment, and to Allah is the returning. During the last session, ये आवाज़ ठीक आ रही है? हाँ? क्योंकि इसमें से आवाज़ वैसे नहीं वापस नहीं आ रही, लगता नहीं कि During the last session, I pointed out that the verse فَكَيْفَ إِذَا جَمَعْنَاهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ وَوُفِّيَتْ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ, which means how will it be with them when we will gather them together on the day about which there is no doubt, is generally understood to apply to the hereafter. But as I pointed out, it has dual meaning. It has an application here in what is going to happen here on this earth, and also it has an application to the hereafter. So why I have repeated this is because I don't remember whether I had established its link with the previous verse in view of its application to the hereafter or not. So perhaps I only dealt with its application to the here in this world during the previous session. So I don't remember, so I wanted to be on the safe side. I want to now take up the thread from a different angle altogether. If this verse means that the day when you will be gathered together means the day after death, the day of resurrection and reckoning, then the connection with the previous verse would be that they claim that the fire will not touch us except for a few days. Now, if that is the rule, then there is no justice, because everybody acts differently and behaves differently in this world. So if without any regard to whether somebody is obedient to Allah, fully evil or extremely evil, or has occasionally committed a mistake here and there, without any regard to these differences, if the punishment is only 3 days of hell, then the God is not just. So the Jews particularly place special stress on Allah being just. Tooth for tooth, eye for eye. And similarly, this particular emphasis of Jew has been dramatized by Shakespeare in Merchant of Venice, and Shylock is taken to be a typical image of the Jewish sense of justice. So that being so, how could they attribute to Allah a completely unjust conduct? They here are just to the degree that they must take a pound of flesh for a pound of flesh, no more and no less. And as far as Allah is concerned, He has completely no regard to the extent of evil somebody has committed in this world, and the punishment is meted out alike to everyone. This is not possible. Now in this regard, it has also a very interesting connection with the following verse. In the previous verse, the sense of justice of the Jews has been criticized in relation to فَكَيْفَ إِذَا جَمَعْنَاهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. In the following verse, the sense of justice of the Christians is criticized, and its absurdity is laid open to us. I'll describe it later. قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ. When I explain this, comment on this verse in detail, then I'll turn to it once again with regard to its exposition on Christian sense of justice. قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ. What is mulk and what is Malik al-Mulk? This has to be studied in detail. And what does Tuizzu man tasha wa tuzillu man tasha mean? The simple rendering of these words has already been made in the translation which I read out to you. But let's examine it a bit more closely. As far as the word mulk is concerned, this has been taken to mean, to apply not only to the possession on this earth, the material possessions of this world, but also the spiritual possessions. And particularly out of the classical scholars, Imam Razi has taken this position that mulk does not only mean ordinary possessions of this world, or states, or realms, but it essentially means the spiritual mulk, and that is Nabuwah, prophethood. And also, in the same spirit, he takes the meaning of the word Tuizzu to mean particularly prophethood by the word proizo. And tuzillo is the word opposite to prophethood. So he takes the word proizo and tuzillo in the extreme meanings possible. Proizo in the spiritual term would mean all the spiritual blessing of Allah in which He raises one's status spiritually. So starting from Salihiyat, it will end up at prophethood. So the maximum application of Proizo would mean that Allah bestows prophethood upon whomsoever. And Tuzillo means that Allah causes some people to be deprived of true guidance from Allah, which comes from prophethood, and thereby they themselves debase themselves. So this is the general treatment of these two words by Imam Razi. Now, the Holy Quran tells us that, explains itself, that milk is a word of widest application. All possessions, even properties, come under milk. And mulk also is a variation of the word milk. And malik contains both the connotations in it. When the word malik is used, it has the connotations of everything, milk and mulk. And also it is said that milk does not necessarily have the connotation of mulk, but in some regards mulk may have the meaning of milk contained in the word milk, particularly when it is applied to God. Milk means, now in English I forgot to translate the word in English, milk means just property, proprietary, to be in possession of something. That is called milk. And mulk means sovereignty, possession of a country. Now milk apparently is a smaller word, but it has its own intensity and superiority over mulk. Ordinarily, the word mulk means that the sovereign is the ruler of a country, but he does not possess it. He is the master in the sense that he makes the rules and laws and governs it, but he is not the possessor of everything in the country. Each individual may have its own possessions with which the king may not have anything to do whatsoever. So if he dispossesses somebody without rhyme or reason, then he is a criminal, he is an unjust king. That only is done through his might, not through his right. But in milk, you have no sovereignty sometimes, but you have complete possession. But it so happens sometimes that you may have sovereignty as well as possession. So, about God, this word mulk means, when it applies to God, it means both. That God is not only the sovereign, but also possesses everything. And this meaning has been explained in the Holy Quran itself, in the expression which I have referred to earlier, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ يَوْمَ لَا تَمْلِكُ نَفْسٌ لِنَفْسٍ شَيْئًا وَالْأَمْرُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلَّهِ. How can we explain to you what the day of deen is? Deen is a word which is in this application, application on the hereafter. It is taken to mean the day when you will be recompensed for your good or evil, when you will be brought to account and rewarded or punished. That is called the day of judgment, deen. But the Holy Quran says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ. How can we make you understand what deen is? Deen means a day when everything else will be entirely dispossessed of its possession. Not even qualities would be possessed by anybody. Everything will be totally disinvested of whatever it has. So Malik is not wal amru yawma izillillah. That's an additional definition of the word Yawmuddin. Not only the possession will return to God, but sovereignty will also return to God. Amr means sovereignty. So it is an additional explanation. So this is why I say when the word mulk is used with regard to Allah, it means complete sovereignty and complete possession. قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ. Tanzil means to take away from somebody, dispossess somebody and give it to somebody else or possess yourself. That means just to do it by force in a sense. When you are capable of taking it away, whether somebody likes it or not, then the word naza is applied. Not a volition necessarily. So, Tanzil mulka mimman tasha means because you have power, this belongs to you, you don't have to take prior permission, or you don't have to convince somebody to part with his property. It belongs to you. So anytime you can come and take it, that sort of expression we use here. Tanzil mulka mimman tasha, the mulk belongs to you. So whenever you so decide, you take it away. But tu'izzu man tasha, and you enhance somebody's status, give high status to someone, and tuzillu man tasha, and debase anyone you please. Biyadikal khair, you possess goodness. Innaka ala kulli shayin qadeer, you have power over everything that you please. Now, from the point of view of various discussions which have been held regarding this verse, we'll have to refer to some classical scholars of Islam who have commented upon this, and there have been some debates going on about the various possible applications of these words. As far as the Arabic dictionary is concerned, the word azza is described as having two possible, the same root but with two possible deflections. It may derive from ya'uzzu azzan, and it may have been derived from ya'uzzu azzan, and may have been derived from azza ya'izzu izzan. In both these cases, the past would be azza, though there would be slight difference in the meaning. But in the future tense, the two futures derived from the same root would differ with each other visibly. In case of azzan, the future would be azza ya'uzzu, and in case of the other deflection, that is izzan, the future would be azza ya'izzu. So in the first case it is azza ya'uzzu, in the second case it is azza ya'izzu. And what is the difference between azzan and izzan? This is to be seen. In the first case, and this is not transitive. It can be used transitively, but it is transitive as well as intransitive. It can be used in both senses. In the first azzan, it is generally used in both, in the sense if somebody gave someone strength, added to somebody's strength, then the Arabs would say azzahu. He strengthened him, gave him more power. And if it is used intransitively, it means somebody by himself became more honored and revered, rose to a position of honor and respect. So here it is used intransitively. Also, it is used intransitively in the sense that he became weak or he was weak, and from a state of weakness and humility, he rose to a position of honor. So there is a sense of comparative state of the same person. Previously he was not as honorable, apparently not as honorable, though potentially he might have been honorable all the time. So this is why this word is used particularly for the description of prophets. Prophets, to begin with, although in the sight of Allah they are always honorable and they deserve the highest respect and command the highest respect potentially. But as far as the ordinary world is concerned, the world finds them extremely weak in the beginning and insignificant and totally powerless before their opponents. So here it means, O our Lord, you send the prophets in a state where they are so meek and humble and totally powerless. Then you make them rise from that humble position to a position of great respect. And when it is said so is so, it means it's a continuous process. Once you put them on the path of gaining more glory and respect, then they never return to the original position of humility ever after. You take them up from a very humble position and make them rise and make them go on rising. Now this is a very interesting declaration which applied to the history of religion is found to be 100% correct. In the ordinary life, many an ordinary person seems to have risen, is known to have risen from humble positions to high positions, high ranks. But this honor which is self-attained, in which nobody else is responsible, that is to say God is not responsible directly, this process may be reversible. They may attain honor and then they may be dishonored at the hands of their fellow men or some accidents, etc. In case of prophets, it's always an irreversible process. This also applies to his Masih. He goes on widening in the respect which he holds. And when he claimed to be a prophet, a messenger of God, then you know he was left all alone. So this very interesting connotation of the word, that one who starts from a position of humility and rises to a position of honor, applies fully and completely to the phenomenon of prophethood. And also this meaning of being irreversible, which has not been mentioned earlier by any scholars, but which Allah has pointed it to me, that this is the process, soizo mantasha, that when you make somebody honorable, then you never snatch honor from him away. What tuzillo mantasha also applies in the same sense, likewise, to the opponents of the Prophet. And it also has the opposite meaning. You never find them after a while gaining their old position and the prophets receding to the old position of humility, etc. Look at the history of Islam, for instance, what happened. All the great Meccan leaders like Abu Jahl and Walid, etc., Utbah and Shayba, they started from a position of a very high respect and honor in the society, while Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was left alone without any helper whatsoever. And he was looked down upon by everybody around him. And gradually, God started raising him from that status to a position of higher and higher and higher esteem. And all his opponents started losing their status. And it was just a one-way traffic for both. No going back whatsoever. Until a time came when there was no one who would take pride in attributing himself to Utbah and Shayba and Walid and Abu Jahl, for instance. It happened sometimes it happened in relation to a son to his father. And that's an outstanding example. Ikramah, sometimes after he became a Muslim, was called the son of Abu Jahl. And this was the greatest insult that could be, with which he could be treated. So he complained to Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, they hurt me so much. They say I am the son of Abu Jahl. So Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited his companion and said nobody should be teased for his relationship to anybody and for his father or any other thing. So that is the phenomenon which has been mentioned in Tu'izzu man tasha wa tuzillu man tasha, generally speaking. Also, it means sovereignty of this earth, in this world. And there, the connection with the previous verse would be, فَكَيْفَ إِذَا جَمَعْنَاهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. How shall they find themselves? What would be their state when we gather people for the ultimate fate they are going to meet? When we're going to make the prophets victorious, not only spiritually speaking, but materially as well. The sovereignties will pass hands, and they will be handed over to the followers of prophets. This has happened once before in the time of Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and on the authority, the first period of Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because all the time ever since belongs to him. So what we should say is that during the first period of his age, this has happened. And on the authority of traditions, we know that this was also meant. It is not something we are attributing. It's not just a possibility, but categorically, God told Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you make this prayer to Allah so that the worldly kingdoms are also handed over to your servants. Now, this is something very interesting. It happened, according to some scholars, during Fateh Makkah, during the great victory of Mecca, and according to some other scholars, during the Battle of the Ditch. And personally, I believe it is very clearly applicable to the Battle of the Ditch, and because it happened before, so it must have initially applied to that period, then that incident which has been related by many narrators, and later on it may have got repeated itself. Moreover, one tradition clearly indicates that this instruction was given to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam before Fateh Makkah, before the victory of Mecca. And that tradition, which is very short but very significant in this regard, is related by Allama Jalaluddin Suyuti in Durr al-Mansur fi Tafsir bil-Ma'thur. He says that Angel Jibreel came to Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and instructed him to pray to Allah, Allahumma Malik al-Mulke. The same verse was pointed out that you should pray to God in these words, Allahumma Malik al-Mulke. And also he said, pray to Allah, Rabbi adkhilni mudkhala sidqin. O my Lord, make me enter the entry of the righteous. So this second prayer applies to the victory of Mecca. So it must have happened before. Because after the victory was granted to him, the teaching of this prayer becomes meaningless and insignificant. So that shows that this previous verse must have some relationship to the Battle of Ditch, and later on it may have been repeated, but initially it applies to that incident which took place on the Battle of Ditch. And what was that incident? I'll quote in detail from Allama Razi. He has related all that tradition completely in full. After briefly mentioning its possible application to Fateh Makkah, that is the victory of Mecca, Allama Razi quotes the second possible application which has been related. He says that according to the second possibility, this verse has a specific relationship to what happened at the time when Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told during the Battle of the Ditch that there is one rock which is so hard that it cannot be broken by anyone. And whenever we attempt to make a dent in that rock, the implements bounce back and no impression is created on the rock. Then Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam went himself to the place and it is said that Hazrat Salman Farsi was sent particularly to report this matter to Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he accompanied him to the point which had created the problems. Then Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam took the what's it called, pixel. What is the pronunciation of that which is pickaxe? No, there is another word. Pixel. With pointed, that's No. It's like pickaxe, but it is not a broad face, but a narrow, harder blade which is used particularly for breaking hard surfaces. Pickaxe. Is that the word for it? That's right. So it must be pickaxe. Yes, I remember now. Yes. So he took the pickaxe from Hazrat Salman Farsi. That is also very significant. incident, because Salman Farsi was the one about whom prophesied that it will be from among his people that his second advent would be. So through him, the second procession of victories was also prophesied. In a sense, that is how I take it. It is not just an accident, but it is a meaningful. It has a meaningful significance, and I think it was ordained by God that He chose the pickaxe of Hazrat Salman Farsi himself. Then he struck that rock once, and a flame leapt out. It was so bright and so big that it seemed as if all the area around had got lighted. And when he saw that flame, he raised the slogan, Allahu Akbar. And the companions along with him raised the same slogan, Allahu Akbar. And then he said that in this flash of light, I was shown the palaces of Hira. And they were so clear, as you see the fangs of a dog, कुचलियां fangs को कहते हैं, कुचली, talons, talons, these canine, canine teeth. What is the name, particular name for this? No, canines are not canines, but I think talons, no, or fangs. Fangs. That's right. Fangs is the word. Yes. So Rasul Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that as you see the fangs of a dog when he opens his mouth and bears the fangs out, and they're so clearly seen, so I saw the palaces of Hira in that flash. Then he struck again, and then again he raised the slogan Allahu Akbar and told his companion that in this flash the red palaces of Roman Empire is mentioned there. They were shown to me. I think their Rome perhaps applies to Constantinople, not to Rome as we know it. In those days, the Roman Empire was divided into two parts, Eastern and Western. So it was the Eastern Roman Empire to which he was referring. So let's say the palaces of Constantinople were shown to him in the second strike. And the third time, the same thing happened, and he said that now this time, the palaces of Sana'a were shown to me in this flash. And also he said that it was not just a vision. Jibreel categorically told me that my ummah, my followers later on, would conquer these, and they will be, the sovereignty of these places would be offered to them. At that instant, many munafiqeen, that is the hypocrites who appeared to be Muslims but not truly Muslims, started mocking at all this. And also those of the non-believers who heard of this incident started joking about it. That look here, the Muslims and the Holy Prophet of Islam altogether, they're so weak that they can't fend themselves in the open. And they have to dig ditches so that the enemy does not reach them. And in this state of total humility and weakness and defenselessness, he is claiming that God is giving him the palaces of Kaiser and the palaces of Rome and the palaces of Yemen, that is the South Arabia. So how can this happen? So they were joking and mocking and teasing the Muslims about this. When Allah sent Angel Jibreel to Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he taught him that he should pray to God in these words, Allahumma malik al-mulke, tutil mulka man tasha, wa tanzil al-mulka mimman tasha, wa tu'izzu man tasha, wa tuzillu man tasha. So that was the answer to their joking and their mocking. And there is a lesson for us in there, that despite the fact that Allah had promised him, yet there was some effort on the part of man which was expected by God. And in this regard, because the difference between the mights of the two was so great, no physical effort could ever be meaningful in any sense. So Allah told him to pray and told him that your prayer would win all these victories which appear to be impossible. And just he was told to pray. And also in the Holy Quran, we find that the word Qul is a singular address and not a plural address. Although through Rasul Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam we are also told to pray, but here the emphasis is made on his single prayer, his own prayer. He was shown this, he was responsible for the fulfillment of these prophecies, which appeared at that time totally impossible. Like today, when we say that Hazrat Masih Maud has been told that his followers and the Muslims would be seen like the particles of sand in Russia, everybody would laugh at us and say, you are mad, you can't have any power in your own country where you belong to originally, and you're talking of those days when Ahmadiyyat would spread like sand particles in Russia. What's this nonsense? That sort of situation was there at that time. As compared to the might of the Muslims of that day, the ratio would be about the same. Because they were great empires. The world was almost divided in two halves by these two great empires. The greatest empire on the east was this Occidental empire of Persia, and in the west, the Oriental empire of Persia, and in the west, the Occidental empire of Rome. So for Allah to tell him alone at that time to pray meant that was the power of Hazrat Rasul Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's prayer. And he was so dear to God. And also it teaches us a lesson in humility, that despite the fact that we are promised great things, we should not take them for granted. If the Holy Prophet, whom Allah held so dear and so close to him, was told to participate in that victory, which was promised to him, how we can be expected to be handed over that victory on a silver platter without the least participation in that? So we must put in our lot. We must work as best as we can. And the most important, most significant role in this victory is going to be played by prayer. And now it might have come to your mind the tradition of the Holy Prophet of Islam, which I related earlier during the course of these sessions, that about the future too, the similar thing was mentioned by Hazrat Rasul Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in application to the time of the Messiah. He said that Allah would send revelation to him, telling him not to think of fighting the two great powers which Allah himself has created. Look here, the two great powers were also to be created in the latter days. And God would tell him that no man has any power to defeat materially these great powers which Allah has himself created for some purposes. So how can you win? The answer was that you should retreat your steps to the shelter of the mountain, or the mountain was mentioned, and pray to God. And through your prayer, that will happen. So already we have been promised that the prayers of Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ would bring about that apparently impossible thing and that great miracle which we are expecting. So the history in this regard would repeat itself. Initially, Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prayers, I believe, would work both for the first period of his ummah and the second period of his ummah. But in the second period also, prominently, his second coming would be involved. And that is to say, the reappearance of the Messiah, because we have been told in reference to him that his prayer would be accepted and ultimately these great empires would be defeated and the sovereignty would be handed over to the servants of the Messiah, that is the servants of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's second advent. But this victory is in reality meaningless to the prophets themselves. They don't lay much store by these things. They want spiritual victory and the nearness to God, and that is all that suffices them. This is why Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told that these victories will be granted to your followers, that is to say in future, not in your lifetime. So in Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam's lifetime, this was not fulfilled. If these victories did have any importance in the sight of Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then this promise should have been fulfilled in his lifetime. But it did not happen so. Similarly, Hazrat Masih Maud has been told of this victory, and which is going to be fulfilled later on in some other day. Now, it's a very strange dispensation of justice at the hands of Allah. He gives people what they like most. In the latter parts of religion, people begin to shift emphasis to the material glories, much more than the spiritual glory. So the material glory does come their way. And fortunate are those who during that time also don't pay any significance to them, don't care for them. So at the time of first fulfillment of this promise to Muhammad, this happened exactly like this. When Abu Huraira, as had been promised by Muhammad, was handed over the handkerchief of Kaiser, of Kisra, that is Khusro in Persian, by Hazrat Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and said that this is the handkerchief which he used for display. You know, it was all studded with jewels and it was a very precious piece of cloth, not for wiping one's nose, running nose, etc., or not for spitting into it, but it was a different thing. Like people who are dandily dressed up nowadays, they have a corner of a handkerchief shown from their vest pocket. That is only for decoration, for display, not for wiping one's mouth or one's nose with it. So when that piece of cloth, that was a source of honor and display for Kisra, was given to Hazrat Abu Huraira, you know what he said? He spat at it and said, Bakhe Bakhe Abu Huraira. O Abu Huraira, what honor Allah has given you. You are a servant of Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This piece of cloth, which was a source of honor for the great king of the East, to you is just a meaningless cloth and you're spitting at it. So that also happened at the time of Hazrat Masih Maud when Allah gave him all these glad tidings of great victories for Ahmadiyyat, he said, मुझको क्या मुल्कों से, मेरा मुल्क है सबसे जुदा, मुझको क्या ताजों से, मेरा ताज है रिजवान यार. What have I to do with these worldly empires and states? Nothing. I'm not interested. My country is a different country from all the rest of the people. मुझको क्या ताजों से? What have I to do with these crowns, worldly crowns? My crown is different, which is Allah's pleasure. So both parted in that glory, which was invisible to the material eye, and with those great crowns on their heads, which ordinary people don't care for. Even when they are offered, they turn their back to them and say, no, we don't need them, we don't want them. But the promises of God would be fulfilled. We hope that in future, when this is done to Ahmadiyyat, we have billions of Abu Hurairas to treat these worldly sovereignties with scant respect. They should spit at that. Only we should be afraid that they should be able to discharge their duties by Allah with regard to this great trust which will be laid upon them. Now, let's see what else needs to be taken note of. Now, before I proceed further, let me once again explain the context and the relationship of this verse with the previous verse, if we take that verse to mean to apply to the hereafter. Now here the meaning is very clear in the light of what we have been what we discussed earlier. There is a continuous thread, and all these verses seem perfectly to apply to the things of this world. And as I have demonstrated on the authority of the traditions of Rasulullah, we are not putting words in the mouth of the Holy Quran. This is exactly what we were told, that these verses do apply to this world, not only to the hereafter. So, it may, as I said, most important meaning of this is Nabuwa. So in that context, that this verse meant that the Jews and the Christians, they consider prophethood as their property, as if they possess it forever and forever. And this they treat it as their personal housemaid. And they say, how can it possible that this housemaid of the house of Israel should be transferred to the Quraysh of Arabia? That was their outlook. So Allah tells them, that Allah is Malik. He is the possessor and sovereign both together. And it is entirely at his free choice and his free will to decide to whom he should give the prophethood and from whom he should take away the prophethood. In this sense, this application would be collective, not individual. It would, because if you try to apply this meaning individually, it will not read sense at all. Because Allah, once He gives prophethood to anybody, never takes it away. So in the meaning of prophethood, Totil mulka man tashao wa tanzil mulka mimman tasha cannot mean that whenever you please, you give prophethood to somebody, and whenever you please, you take away prophethood from him. Because in the history of religion, it has never happened and it can never happen that God grants somebody this honor and then takes it away. This is why I said Toizo Mantasha has a quality of permanence about it. He gives that honor permanently, and it goes on increasing rather than decreasing. So it only means a collective application of this word. It only means that Allah, because He is the possessor and the last, final, ultimate sovereign of everything, so He decides which people to give prophethood and from which people to take it away. Here, Tanzil Mulka Mimman Tasha would mean that at different times in history, He chose certain people for the expression of His prophethood, bestowing of His prophethood, and after a while, when He so decided that they no longer deserve it, He took away the prophethood from them and gave it to some other people. Like He did in the case of Ahmad, He took the prophethood from the house of Isaac and handed it over to the house of Ishmael. But still, both of them together cannot also make the same claim that now we possess it and nobody else can ever have it. This verse reminds us that it's entirely the prerogative of God to decide in these matters, and whomsoever He pleased, He would honor with His prophethood. Now again, in context, in connection with the earlier verse, I said that the Jews were told that your sense of justice, when applied to yourself, is perfect and complete. But when applied to God, it's distorted and totally meaningless. So also this verse discusses Christianity. How does it discuss Christianity? Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ, during his debates, laid great emphasis on God's attribute of Malikiyah. All through his debate with Abdullah Atham, for instance, he repeatedly referred to this. He said, your concept of justice of God is imperfect. And this is why you think that God cannot forgive. He is just, in your view, as a justice appointed by a sovereign who has to decide according to certain rules and regulations over which he is not master. Because he is not master, he is a servant of some other sovereign, so his sense of justice would limit his action. He cannot pardon, for instance, certain crimes when they are committed and proved beyond doubt. But kings can, and if the kings are also the possessor of everything, not only sovereigns, then they have no limit of forgiveness. They can do whatever they please. So this is why Hazrat Masih Maud pointed out that Surah Fatiha does not present God as Adil, a just God, but presents Him as Malik, the one who possesses everything and who is the sovereign of everything. So why should He not be able to forgive others? And because this is the main theme of this surah, particularly Christianity is being discussed here, and also occasionally reference is made to the Judaism altogether, but mostly Christianity. So here in this verse, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ emphasizes God's attributes of Malikiyah. and says that how can Christians believe that God did not have power to forgive sins? God has displayed His total possession in every respect in this world. Look at the history of mankind, look at anything else, how the things behave in nature. You will find that God takes things from one people's possession and hands it over to the other. And in every respect, in the material world also, He goes on changing things from one to the other. So if He is so powerful and so strong in His sovereignty and also in His right, then why should He seek some lame excuses for forgiveness? It's absurd and stupid. Malik does not need any forgiveness. And if He needs some excuses, what excuse did Jesus have to forgive others? His Son was more powerful in this regard? Was He greater sovereign? And also it points out that you do not see any role of Jesus Christ in the changing over of sovereignties in this world, or changing over of prophethood in this world. What part has He ever played in this? What part can He ever play in this? If none, then what is the need of a Son? What is He there for? Even without Him, sovereignties used to change hands as they did even afterwards. And moreover, there is a prophecy that sovereignty would be taken from His own people and handed over to the claimant of prophethood elsewhere. And the Jesus Christ would be so powerless that He will not be able to stop that transfer. So it happens, and this is why this prophecy acquires a special significance for the Muslim world in the doctrinal debate as well. Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told this, that Constantinople, that the power of Constantinople would be handed over to his servants. And he made it known to the people when he was the weakest among the Arabs. Not only in the world, but even among the Arabs, he was the weakest. He was made an object of mockery by the people of his time. And it so happened that nobody could change that fate which was mentioned in that prophecy. So that showed his God, whichever God he belonged to, had full sovereignty. And against him, the followers of Jesus had no power whatsoever. So also it says later on that it may go back to them once again. But it will be taken once again from their hands and handed over to the followers of the Holy Prophet of Islam. The following verses will speak of that. وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ. Whomever you decide to bring low, you bring him low, and nobody can stop this. بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ, you possess goodness. Now this expression, you possess goodness, has intrigued many classical scholars, even Imam Razi. He is confused about this, and he says, why has not God mentioned shar along with khair, evil along with goodness? He does not only possess khair, he also possesses evil. He is the master of all things. And this is the claim made, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ. So these scholars find a sort of contradiction, inherent contradiction in this. If he is Malik al-Mulk, possesses everything, has command over everything, then why should he mention command over goodness and not command over evil at all? That is the issue which has been raised by various scholars. And some say that shar is left out, but in meaning it is included. What God wanted to say was, teach the prayer was, Biyadikal khairu washarru. You possess both goodness and evil, but it was left out as understood. So, khair also includes evil in that sense. Now, as far as the word mulk is concerned, I forgot to mention this to you earlier, that it is not Imam Razi's own interpretation that mulk also means prophethood, but it is, his view is based on a tradition of Hazrat Ibn Abbas. He it was who first mentioned that mulk means prophethood as well. And because Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had prayed for him to Allah that he should grant him special meanings of the Holy Quran. So in Ibn Abbas you find some very interesting observation, such as generally would elude ordinary person. But unfortunately, at the same time, you should be wary in treating those traditions which are related through Ibn Abbas or about to him. Because when people learned that Ibn Abbas's authority is going to prevail over all other authorities, then they started also attributing false things to him. And about this, all scholars are united on this, in this opinion, that as far as Ibn Abbas is concerned, you should investigate the matter and pick and choose with care, because many people have attributed things to Hazrat Abbas to gain ascendancy for themselves in what they believe. But anyway, this one is beyond doubt, because this holds water. It is well connected and is full of wonderful meaning. So no false man could ever have thought of it. So it has to be Hazrat Abbas and nobody else, Hazrat Ibn Abbas. Now I'll turn to Hazrat Imam Razi again and tell him what objection he has about this word khair, and khair alone, without any mention of shar. Now he raises a question which is a very wonderful question. And instead of answering it in affirmative that yes, this is the obvious result, he then goes on rejecting the import of the question and offering some excuses. The question he raises is that Biyadikal khair means Allah has only power over good things, which shows that about rejection and sin were not created by God. And this seems strange to him. To us, to me in particular, it does not seem strange at all. There is absolutely no objection against this. This is exactly how the things stand. Allah never created evil, nor ever God created sin. Khair is a positive value, the absence of which is sin, and absence of which is evil. Like light, when it is absent, what you see is darkness. So if somebody creates light, it does not mean that he has also created darkness. He does not have to. If somebody does not use that light, darkness would automatically be created as an opposite pole. So sometimes these things are referred to have been created by God in this sense, that God has, whenever God created a positive value, an opposite number was automatically born, automatically it came into being. So whenever the positive value was not benefited from, then the opposite number would be present, and you can't escape from one of the two possibilities. Either there is goodness or there is evil. Either there is light or there is darkness. And the confusion in between is like dusk. When halfway you have traveled towards light and you have only partially benefited from light, then there is the internal confusion, no man's land, like dusk and dawn in the early and the late period. So God is the creator of goodness. He is not the creator. He does not have to create evil, because when goodness is not there, what is left is evil. But anyway, he says, Al-Khair खुदा की कुदरतों को महदूद और महसूर नहीं करती. He says that here khair is not mentioned as to express all that he possesses. It is mentioned by way of illustration that he possesses such as khair, such as goodness, and it does not obviate the possibility of its containing the sense of shar as well. He possesses everything such as khair. That is the meaning which is attributed by Hazrat Imam Razi to avoid this dilemma, that if we say that God only possesses goodness or creates goodness, then what about the evil and sin and everything? Now, why they were afraid of this? Because of the concept of dualism. Zoroastrianism, for instance, had believed that there were two gods, one of good and one of evil. One had created light and the other had created darkness. So the Muslim scholars were afraid of falling into the trap of Zoroastrians. If they emphasized that God only created goodness, they thought automatically everybody would begin to believe that perhaps the Zoroastrians were right. There has to be some other created which is the creator of evil, and that is Satan. So two beings will have to be believed in as possessing powers of creation of some sort. But that was not necessary. What they missed was that only one pole is to be created, the other automatically comes into being. This is the scientific observation. Now, the verse, that part of the verse which follows immediately also strengthens this point of view which I am presenting. After saying Biyadek al-Khair, immediately God says, Innaka ala kull, tells us to pray, Innaka ala kulli shayin qadir. That just to be able to possess khair is enough to make someone powerful over everything else. If you possess the positive values, then you can juggle with the positive values in a manner that apparently so many other values would come into being and come into play. You reduce the quantity of khair or light, that much darkness would appear. And you remove light altogether, then darkness would come in fully and totally. So to express this further, the second verse of the Holy Quran which follows immediately says, Tulijul layla fin nahari wa tulijul nahara fil layl. Although God possesses only goodness, but He enters the night into the day. Now here, and also enters the day into the night. Here, some translators have translated it exactly in the opposite manner to some other translators. Some say tulijul layla fin nahare means that you turn night into day. And some say it means you turn day into night. So Zafullah Khan Sahib, for instance, has translated it as you turn day into night in the first instance, and in the second you turn night into day. In this translation, which was rendered by Mullah Ghulam Farid Sahib, the opposite position is, I think, adopted. Thou makest the night pass into the day. That is to say, you turn the night into day, not the day into night. And that is how it should be. Because in the whole expression, Allah is emphasizing the positive value and not the negative value. For instance, in the following part of the same verse, he says, وَتُخْرِجُ الْحَيَّ مِنَ الْمَيِّتِ, and telling us to pray in the manner that you تُخْرِجُ الْحَيَّ مِنَ الْمَيِّتِ, you derive life from death. You make the living from the dead. Here the living are emphasized. And as opposite number, the second part of the verse says, وَتُخْرِجُ الْمَيِّتَ مِنَ الْحَيِّ, and also you turn the living into the dead, or you turn life into death. So the first positive number is emphasized, then the negative number is mentioned as an alternative. So why should Allah change this style here? In the first part, why should Allah say He turns day into night and emphasize night rather than day? So this meaning must be correct, as understood by Mullah Ghulam Farid and many others, that the meaning is you turn night into day. Now when you try to understand the word tulejo, then it becomes clear why people thought this and why was this confusion. Walaja yelejo means he entered something into another thing. Now those who think that it means tuliju lela fin nahare means you turn day into night, they say that God is telling us that God took up night and put it into the day, with the result that the day was displaced by night. That was the picture they created in their minds. So why people should have translated it the other way, exactly in the opposite manner? Because walaja means something which enters. And when it enters to that degree, that thing displaces the space it occupies. And now, this is the first meaning. Tuliju lela, when the lal enters, the people who take it to mean that turns the day into night, they say, tuliju means enters. And when something enters, it displaces displaces the thing which had occupied the place which has now occupied. If you enter something into this cup, it will displace whatever is contained by the cup. So they say lail, darkness, when it enters the day, automatically it should displace the day. But why I say the opposite is correct, not only because it should rhyme well with the style of the verse, it should fall into piece with the style of the verse, but also because of the Arabic usage. The Arabs, for instance, one Arab poet says, Ra arnaban sanahat bil fadai fabadarahu wala jatil khamar kama suznikun ala marbain دقيق الفؤاد خفيف النظر رأى أرنبا صنعت بالفضاء فبادره ولجات الخمر. The second verse supports this meaning which I am taking and which Malik Ghulam Fri Sahib has also already adopted. It says, it creates the picture of an eagle who is sitting on the top of a rock. And suddenly he notices Arnaban, a rabbit, jump into the open space surrounded by the bush. And at that moment, it suddenly swoops upon that. And so fast that before the rabbit, walajatil khamar, before it could enter and disappear into the bush around, it overtook him and overtakes it and grabs it. So walajat means disappearance of the thing which enters a thing, not the other way around. The thing which enters the bush, that has disappeared from the side. It has not displaced the bush and make the bush disappear. This is the Arabic usage of the classical poets. So because it is an established principle that the classical usage of the Arabs is to be used in the explanation of the Holy Quran, because the Holy Quran was revealed in the classical Arabic. So here the meaning is, when the night enters the day, the night disappears and not the day. And when the day is told to have entered the night, the day disappears and not the night. So apparently the Lal is the named first, but the expression still remains the same, that it is God who changes the night or makes the night disappear into day. That is to say, the day is dawn, the day breaks forth, and the night disappears. وَتُولِجُ اللَّيْلَ فِي النَّهَارِ وَتُولِجُ النَّهَارَ فِي اللَّيْلِ. And similarly, O our Lord, you make the days disappear into nights. So that is God, who has complete possession over everything. He makes the living out of dead, the dead out of living, darkness out of light, light out of darkness, and does it alone, and he does not need a son to help him. This is a total possession. This is why it exactly is in the context of what has been related before and what is going to follow. This applies continuously, among other things, to the subject of Christianity, and arms us with strong arguments against the Christian view. Now, interestingly enough, the Christian scholars have made it the object of their scorn by taking the position that this verse, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ, and also the following verse, تُولِجُ اللَّيْلَ فِي النَّهَارِ, is completely out of context. Very, again, points out it is not his original idea, it is the original idea of another similar so-called scholar on Islam, J.M. Rodwell, who is also extremely inimical to Islam. So Very quotes him and says that according to Rodwell, this verse, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ, has no right to be here. It is completely out of place. I mean, the subject discussed before and after has nothing to do with this verse. So it is proved beyond doubt, according to them, that this verse must have lost its way into this place. And according to Mr. Rodwell, perhaps this verse was revealed in Mecca. And in that surah, which is called Surah Mulk, what was the verse? Tabarakallazi biyadihil mulku wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. And it fits immediately after that. So, because of that, because it fits there, so it must have belonged there, and all the companions of the Holy Prophet and all the living people at the time the Holy Quran was assembled forgot about it, and only it was for Rodwell to discover that this was a mistake made. Because he could not understand the relationship with the context. Well, as I have explained, the relationship is not only a single relationship, but double and treble relationship. On both sides, these verses are bonded strongly to the subject discussed earlier and the subject discussed in following this. Moreover, as I begin to understand their nature, they perhaps wanted to distract us from their true significance, which is a great proof of the truth of the Holy Prophet. If these verses were really taken to belong here where they do belong actually, then all what was said about them, about their application on to the incident of the Battle of Ditch, would also be will have to be accepted as such. And because therein lies a great prophecy, which was later on fulfilled. So they were so worried about all this incident, and they could not understand how it could happen that at the Battle of the Ditch, this verse was revealed, and this applied to that incident, and also a great prophecy was mentioned therein, which was fulfilled later on. So this must have disturbed these two so-called scholars. So what they could not deny the existence of that incident itself. It was so strongly reported through various routes in tradition. So what a cunning way to deprive Islam of a proof of the truth of the Holy Quran by taking this verse entirely, snatching it out from its moorings and trying to place it far, far back in the days of Mecca. So knowing their habits, it's not barzani as they call it. It's not thinking ill of them. This is measuring them correctly. Having that crooked nature, they must have done it by way of doing damage to Islam, or at least depriving the Holy Quran of some wonderful proof of its truth. So I think it is already time, 9:45. So inshallah we'll take it up tomorrow. The day after tomorrow, the remaining portion. So we'll start with Tulijul Layla fil Nahari wa Tulijul Nahara fil Layli. We have not exhausted the study of this verse. So inshallah the day after tomorrow we will take it up from where we left. Najili? And if in the meantime, after reconsulting my papers, I find that I have omitted some important thing about this verse, which we think we have discussed already, then I'll take it up again and we'll start from where we left in the earlier verse. So we'll proceed directly to the mosque for the prayer.